Hello, cruel, cruel world. My name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. Dr. Grande is the host of a popular YouTube psychology channel, and his channel, called Dr. Grande, recently got 1 million subscribers, which is obviously very impressive. My issue with Todd Grande is misrepresentation of his qualifications and his expertise. That's my main issue with it. So he does have a PhD in Counselor Education and Supervision, and he's licensed professional counsellor of mental health, LPCMH, and he's a licensed chemical dependency counsellor, LCDP. All of those things are on his website. The problem is that his videos have nothing to do with educating counsellors, and even though it says on his channel that it covers topics related to counsellor education and supervision, included but not limited to mental health, human behaviour, relationship dynamics, psychopathology, personality theory, true crime, research statistics, SPSS, Excel appraisal and group counselling, that's what it said. From what I can see, certainly for his recent videos, they basically cover the psychoanalysis of well-known cases, either true crime or pop culture or celebrities, and they give specific diagnoses and they analyse personality factors. And basically my issue is that because he calls himself Dr. Grande and covers those specific issues, I think he suggests or he misleads people into thinking that he's a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist, when he's not. Now, I want to be absolutely crystal clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with counsellors. I'm not saying that. They're an important part of the system, and their work is valuable when it comes to treating and rehabilitating people with mental health problems. But they do not have the expertise or the authority of a psychiatrist. They cannot section, for example, they cannot prescribe, but most importantly, in terms of the videos he makes, they cannot diagnose. So it would be different if he made that clear on each video, or if the channel was called something else. But I think the doctor in the title of the channel and the doctor in what he calls himself, that is the part that's misleading. Now, you might think that I'm being pernickety, but almost every other person that I can find in YouTube on this space, including myself, clearly outlines their qualifications and their expertise in every single video. So you will see at the beginning of this video, I said, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. When I say hello, cruel world, when I have videos edited, which is not always, because sometimes I've newsjacked, but when I do, I make sure my qualifications are on the screen. So to be crystal clear to his fans and my haters, I'm not saying that Dr. Grande is not allowed to make videos. Of course he is. Of course he's allowed to make videos. He's allowed to give his opinions. But I think he should make it clearer that he has no expertise in what he's talking about. Because I think that some viewers might put more weight on what he's saying and his opinions compared to, say, like another random YouTuber. And this is reflected by the fact that he actually makes mistakes. He gets things wrong clinically, like the case of Chris Watts, which I will come to later. And if people don't know that he's not an expert, then viewers will be misled into kind of, into the weight of his opinions. I have to say this is better now. So I made a diss video to Dr. Grande at the end of 2020. See links below if you want to see that. And before I made that video, there was nothing on his YouTube channel at all about his qualifications. And I was going to let it slide, but I thought it was really hypocritical because he made a video about named Jill Biden, Is She Really a Doctor? That was released on his channel on the 14th of September 2020. And basically that video was about how Jill Biden was misrepresenting herself because she had a PhD, but she was insinuating in some conversations that she had medical authority as a doctor. And I just, this like smacked of hypocrisy to me, because I think that's exactly what he's doing. So I wasn't going to do a video, but I felt compelled to do that because I thought he was doing exactly that. And Dr. Grande did not respond to that video, and why would he? I'm only a small, measly little YouTuber, but interestingly, he put his qualifications up about a week after that. So before then, without any qualifications up on his channel at all, I think he was at worst intentionally misleading his viewers and at best passively misleading them, i.e. not considering that he might be misleading them. So I'm a qualified doctor. I went to medical school. I'm registered with the General Medical Council. You can check that on their website. I'm allowed to prescribe medication, right? But if I sat down in a cardiology clinic, say, and I just happened to hire a room in that clinic, and if I called you in and I listened to your chest and I gave you advice about medications, and I never said, oh, by the way, I'm a psychiatrist and I'm not a cardiologist, and I have previously prescribed cardiac medication as a junior doctor, but that was like 15 years ago, you know, I've probably forgotten most things, then you would very reasonably question my advice, and you should do, and you might ask for a second opinion. So I'm trying to draw an analogy by, he's kind of doing that, but he's not letting you know that he's not in that space. And I think, again, he's certainly marketing himself as a trained psychologist or a psychiatrist. That's my main problem with Dr. Grande. My second problem is the tone of some of his videos. People make mistakes. I'm sure I've got some videos where I've just got the tone wrong, so, you know. But I find that at times he's victim shaming or he's mocking the victims. And I cover cases, I try and inject some humours, but to my knowledge, I've never mocked a victim. When I make a joke, it's either at the expense of the perpetrator or of something silly or of the situation or even myself. Anna Psychology, who also makes videos like this, made a great point when she called him out on a video. Again, I will put the links in the comments below. When she called Dr. Grande out on a video that he did about 𝐒𝐞𝐦𝐭𝐦. Full disclosure, I'm about to nick her points just because she does a better job than I can do of explaining the issues of that particular video. But to summarize, this was about the daughter of Kellyanne Conway, who used to work for Trump. And it was a very delicate kind of situation, and seemingly she was bullying, possibly physically bullying her daughter. And there was even some daughter Claudia Conway, and there was even some suggestion that she leaked an intimate photo of her daughter because it was released from Kellyanne Conway's account. And basically Dr. Grande kept making jokes about this, and he made assumptions about the situation, even though he said at the beginning of the video that he knew very little about the situation. And some of what he said was quite judgmental. He belittled her for her age and her gender and suggested that she knew nothing about politics. But then what would you expect a 15-year-old girl to know about politics? Well, not even a 15-year-old girl, a 15-year-old in general. I certainly knew next to nothing when I was that age. And he made comments like restricting social media is probably what she should do as a strategy. And it's easy to say, and I do agree that in some situations, people, especially teenagers, might overuse social media, and it might be bad for their mental health. I think we all know that, that's not news. But in this particular situation, it might be difficult for a 15-year-old girl if she is in a particular social circle. She might be excluded from that circle if she steps out of social media. Plus, it might be her way of getting attention and help for the abuse she was suffering. So I just think it was a bit tasteless. And the other thing he said is it's helpful if people don't shout at each other. And again, that doesn't really help if you're a victim of abuse and you're being shouted at. If you're a child and you're being shouted at by your mother who's supposed to support you. I have helped rehabilitate many people who have had issues with being the victim of abuse when they were younger, and I don't think that's a particularly helpful thing to say. Another video, which just as an example, was when he effectively called the accusers of Michael Jackson, Wade Robson and someone else, liars, and said that their documentary was boring. And I think he was insinuating they were lying because they changed their story, but child abuse is such a complicated matter, and there's so many valid reasons why a child might be influenced by an adult, somebody they admire, somebody powerful, somebody famous. And there's very valid reasons why they might change their minds or contradict themselves or even lie in court. And all of these things were outlined in the Finding Neverland documentary. I mean, this is basically the very basic, really obvious elements of grooming. I've done a video about grooming if you're interested, by the way. I'll put that in the links. So why am I mentioning this? I'm not sure that Dr. Grande should be giving opinions on such sensitive, delicate issues in such a callous way. And I imagine, I don't know for a fact, but I imagine you don't need expertise in grooming or understanding grooming to be a counsellor. That's the kind of thing for a forensic psychiatrist such as myself. So I make my living working for the NHS and private medico-legal work, assessing mentally disordered offenders. And it's not a kind of area I think for a counsellor like him. And if he does deal with grooming child cases, then that's even worse, that he's not able to grasp the basic concepts of children being manipulated, and the fact that he doesn't seem to either understand or at least talk about the fact that it's more complicated than it might seem superficially. Okay, moving on, my third problem with Dr. Grande, and it's inevitable if you're not an expert, is he actually makes some clinical mistakes. So I'm going to take the example of the video he did on Chris Watts, just because I've seen it recently. So he's talking about psychopathy and whether Chris Watts meets this diagnosis, and he insinuated that Chris Watts had a lot of these traits. And I think that's completely incorrect. So if you see my videos, you'll know about my opinion on what psychopaths are. It's all about charm and manipulation. Those are part of their core personality. You can't be a psychopath if you don't have that. And Chris Watts did not have that. He did have sudden extreme acts of violence, and what he did, if you've heard about this case, he killed his wife and 2 daughters. What he did obviously was horrendous, but Dr. Grande talked about impulsivity, criminal versatility, irresponsibility, behavioural control. These are all part of elements of being a psychopath, and he said that Chris Watts would score high on all of those things, and he wouldn't. That's incorrect. The actions that Chris Watts took on that day would indicate all of those things. But psychopathy, the whole point of psychopathy is that it's an extreme personality disorder, and it is therefore pervasive and entrenched. And the reason that we diagnose psychopaths is because it helps us understand our ability to treat them. And so those factors or features on a one-off occasion makes no difference to somebody's, it makes a difference to somebody's, how somebody commits a crime, but it doesn't make a difference to their rehabilitation. It's when those are entrenched personality traits that it might indicate psychopathy, which might indicate resistance to treatment. So another kind of specific example is that criminal versatility in the context of diagnosing psychopaths is about lifetime offending, such as somebody committing fraud and theft and different types of assault and violence. And Chris Watts committed horrific acts. Nobody's disagreeing with that. But Dr. Grande was insinuating that because he used slightly different types of modes of murder on the same day, that is criminal versatility. That's absolutely wrong. That's pretty much the opposite. But what I think this boils down to is expertise. So I've literally formally diagnosed and treated, rehabilitated psychopaths. I've made videos about it. If you're interested, go check my video out on Anna Delvey, who's far more manipulative, far more typically a psychopath than Chris Watts. Go see that video. Dr. Grande, to me, comes across as somebody who's just Googled how to diagnose a psychopath. So what I do in my professional role is sometimes I mark junior doctors for workplace-based assessments for their training placement so they can qualify as consultant forensic psychiatrists. And this is the kind of thing that I would assess. So they would come and do this kind of diagnosis. And if they put in work like Dr. Grande had done for the Chris Watts case, I would fail them. Again, just to be crystal clear, he's allowed to do this. He's allowed to make these videos, but he should say something along the lines of, by the way, I'm totally guessing here, I don't diagnose psychopaths. Again, not because I think he should do it, but because I think it's misleading to his viewers and it's miseducating people. Similarly, Dr. Grande was using this Ocean 5-factor personality scale. To be fair to him, he's not done this recently, he's not done it in his last couple of videos, but he did it for a long time, for the last couple of years. It's on dozens, if not hundreds of his videos. And it is just an antiquated, old way of looking at personality. My wife is an A-level psychology GCSE teacher, A-level teacher, and she doesn't have it in her textbooks because it is archaic and it's simplistic. I've written several hundred court reports to give evidence as an expert witness, and I've probably read over 1,000 by psychologists. There's a big gap between psychiatrists and psychologists. I won't go into it now, but psychologists do like personality inventories and tests. And I've never seen one single report using the Ocean scale. I think it would be embarrassing if somebody professional tried to put in something like that, but Dr. Grande has been using that for most of his videos. So to put that into a kind of analogy, I know almost nothing about computing, but if I went into a class and a dude was talking about floppy disks and dongles and tried to teach us on a ZX Spectrum +3, I would be worried. If I went to my doctor and he told me that I should smoke cigarettes to clear my lungs and to decrease my anxiety like they did in the 1800s.
Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, they're particular about the brand they choose.
I would be worried. To me, all of that stuff has the same scientific rigor as using the Ocean scale. And the fact that Dr. Grande is using this ancient system and doesn't seem to even know that it's kind of out of date is concerning. Another issue for me is this, is at the beginning of his videos he says, I'm not diagnosing, I'm only saying what happens in a situation like this. with all due respect, you pretty much are diagnosing. Just because you say you're not going to do something and then do it immediately doesn't undo what you're about to do. Does that make sense? So with all like, if I was to say to a random person, with all due respect, I hate your kid, her breath smells, I don't care for her rambling stories about cats, I saw one of her drawings this morning and her ability to draw tigers frankly made me physically vomit, then that's being rude and disrespectful, even if you said with all due respect at the beginning. And similarly, that reminds me of when the case with 𝐂𝐞𝐦𝐭𝐞𝐦 Conway, when Dr Grande was saying, well, he made assumptions even though he said at the beginning he knows little about the situation. Just saying that doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. And also connected to that, he says at the beginning of his videos, I'm only saying what happens in a situation like this. You're not though, are you? You're saying what's happening in that situation. So, for example, when Will Smith hit Chris Rock, you're not saying what happens in a situation like this, you're saying what happens in that situation, which is fine. I've done the same thing. I've done a video on that exact topic, but don't pretend you're doing it about something else. Just say that you say what you know, mean what you say and say what you mean. To stand up for Dr Grande, in researching this, he has copped a lot of flack off different people on the internet. And one of the reasons that he's been getting a bit of fallback is because he's been diagnosing people he never met. I'm going to stand up for him here, partly because I do the same, so it would be hypocritical if I didn't. But also, I think it's clear that he's offering an opinion. He's not making a formal diagnosis. He's making a YouTube video. It's not something that's going into somebody's medical notes. And I think we all know, if you're watching YouTube, that it can be an educational platform, but I think most people understand that it's one person's opinion and that it's not going to, like, he's not making a diagnosis that's going to influence their treatment. And in fact, as I keep saying, he's not actually doesn't have the power to make a diagnosis because he's not a psychiatrist. Apologies if I keep flexing my psychiatrist muscles, but I'm just trying to make it clear, counsellors cannot diagnose. Their role is very important. They help overcome some distress and they can have opinions, and counsellors can recognise clusters of symptoms, but they don't make formal diagnosis in real life. If they suspect a diagnosis, they would refer it to a psychiatrist such as myself. Another issue I have with Dr Grande is his humour. To be honest, it's not for me, although I completely recognise that humour is subjective. Just ask Will Smith.
Keep my name out your mouth!
And people have gone out of my way in the comment sections of my video to tell me that I'm not funny, and if it's somebody's genuine opinion, then that's fair enough, I accept it. To be honest, there's nothing fundamentally immoral about Dr Grande not being funny, but there is something fundamentally immoral, in my opinion, about passively misleading people by insinuating expertise through his titles. So, to conclude, let's keep it moving. I ain't got time for shucking and jiving. Hats off to Dr Grande. He is successful. He's very responsive to news items. He's got a good sort of throughput of videos, and it must have taken a lot of hustle to get where he is. He's been going since 2007. He's got to 1 million subs, and that's all impressive, and I'll give him props for that. But just all the issues that I've explained above makes some of what he says and some of what he portrays makes me uncomfortable. And I know that other people feel the same way. It could all be sorted out if he's just a little bit more honest at the beginning of his videos, if he describes his limitations, if he explains that the doctor in Dr Grande is nothing, doesn't make him an expertise in the topic matter that he chooses to make. So let's talk about jealousy. I did a previous video in December 2020 about Dr Grande, as I said before, about the hypocrisy, and I got mixed responses. Many people agreed with me, many people called me jealous. Interestingly, several people commented that they didn't realise that he had this lack of expertise and they assumed he was a psychologist or a psychiatrist until they saw my video. So I think the very fact that it happened kind of proves my point. Am I jealous? I can totally understand why people say that, because I am a new YouTuber and Dr Grande is very established, very popular, and he's very successful. And I think if you believe that I'm jealous, there's not much I can say that's going to change your mind. But I will attempt to by explaining this. There are many successful psychological-based YouTube channels around, some of which I watch. There's the Psych Show with 𝐂𝐿𝐼𝐌𝐿𝐼, I believe is his name, Anna Psychology, Dr 𝐿𝐼𝐴𝐻, Psych2Go, and I have a lot of respect for all these channels. You'll never see me say a bad word about them. There's not a single video or comment on any of my 150 odd videos that disses any of them. They are more established and popular than me. Some of them are even more popular than Dr Grande. Psych2Go is a perfect example, so it's got over 9 million followers. And as far as I can tell, some of the people that contribute to it, some of the content makers, have less qualifications or no qualifications in mental health, so less than Dr Grande. So logically, if I'm jealous, then I should have 9 times the amount of envy for Psych2Go, but I don't. And this is why, because Psych2Go are very honest. They say what they are, or who they are, and what their qualifications are or aren't. So it's not the popularity that bothers me, it's the misleading credentials and that leading to clinical mistakes. Similarly, many YouTube channels or many YouTubers talk about their mental health, but they're not specifically qualified. They talk about their life experiences, and I've got no problem with that. In fact, I'd go further. I would say that there's something of value that they can add, a perspective they can add that I cannot, because I've not lived through these issues. I've watched, and I do watch numerous videos and channels like that, and I learn from them. So if I was jealous, then I wouldn't want them to do well, but that's the opposite of what I think. The final thing I wanted to say is this. These are just my opinions. I do not have the temerity to believe that it's my right to suggest that anybody should be cancelled. I don't own YouTube. Dr Grande has the right to make videos. I just wanted to make the point that I think that it's unethical for him to call himself and his channel Dr Grande, talk about specific psychiatric and psychological areas, and I think he's got a responsibility to explain that his opinions are not born from clinical experience, because it is passively assumed that way, I think, by most people. Especially if experts, not just me, but other experts from the internet, like Anna Psychology, are calling him out for getting it wrong. Okay, rant over. I'd be remiss not to plug my own channel here. So I use my actual clinical experience of working as a consultant forensic psychiatrist, where I assess mentally disordered offenders in courts and prisons and in psychiatric units. I talk about a whole range of issues related to mental health and the crossover with psychiatry. If you like your true crime with a sprinkle of psychiatry, go check out my channel. I've done some videos recently on Katherine, first Australian woman to get a life sentence after she beheaded her husband to get a full life tariff. Did a video on internet trolling, ironic possibly considering this content. Done a video on the psychoanalysis of Putin, and also one recently on Jimmy Savile. Enjoy my content, have a blessed day, peace out, and do not forget, I hate you. Sorry, I mean, I love you.